Welcome. What you are about to watch is not science fiction, and it is not folklore. It is a serious investigation into one of history's most compelling unresolved questions, the mystery of the Paracas Textile Enigma, ancient fabric technology that still baffles scientists. Across the world, in universities, research institutes, and field excavations, serious scholars are wrestling with evidence that does not fit the accepted story. Evidence that has been documented, measured, and peer-reviewed, and that still has no satisfying conventional explanation. We are going to look at that evidence carefully, without prejudice in either direction. Not dismissing what is extraordinary, but not accepting it without scrutiny either. The truth, as always, is in the details. In the 1920s, archaeologist Julio Tello excavated burial bundles in the Paracas Peninsula of Peru and found textiles so fine they contained 398 threads per inch, finer than the highest thread count Egyptian cotton available today. The Paracas culture wove these fabrics 2,000 years ago using techniques that have never been fully replicated. Some threads are thinner than a human hair. Every generation of textile scholars has examined these fabrics and arrived at the same uncomfortable conclusion. The technical achievement is real, the thread counts have been independently verified by multiple laboratories, and no one can explain exactly how they did it. No spinning tool recovered from Paracas sites produces thread this fine. No known Andean technique accounts for the consistency of the diameter across hundreds of meters of continuous thread. The colors have survived 2,000 years in the Atacama Desert without fading, and the embroidered scenes, warriors, deities, mythical animals, are rendered with a precision that seems to mock the supposed limitations of the time. What do we actually know about who made them, how, and why? And what does it mean that modern industry, with all its machinery, can barely match? What an ancient Peruvian weaver accomplished by hand. This is where our investigation begins. Stay with us, because the further we go into the evidence, the more extraordinary it becomes. The story you think you know is only the surface. Beneath it lies something far more remarkable. Let us begin. Before we examine the specific evidence, we need to step back and understand the context. This case does not exist in isolation. It sits within the wider world of ancient technological anomalies, and to properly evaluate what we are looking at, we need to understand the broader picture that surrounds it. Out-of-place artifacts, objects found in geological or archaeological contexts that predate their supposed invention, represent one of the most contentious categories in all of science. The scientific establishment's response to such discoveries has historically fallen into two camps. The first is skeptical investigation, careful re-examination of the dating, the context, and the object itself, which often reveals a mundane explanation. The second, rarer response is acknowledgement, a formal revision of the assumed timeline in light of evidence that cannot be explained away. Both responses have legitimate roles. The history of archaeology includes many cases where enthusiastic amateur discoveries of supposedly ancient anomalies turned out to be forgeries, misidentified natural formations, or artifacts simply displaced from their original layer by post-depositional disturbance. Critical scrutiny of extraordinary claims is not closed-mindedness. It is scientific responsibility, but it must be applied consistently. The same rigorous scrutiny applied to anomalous claims must also be applied to the mainstream assumptions those claims challenge. And sometimes, when the evidence is examined honestly, the mainstream assumption is the one that breaks. The significance of genuine out-of-place artifacts goes beyond the objects themselves. Each one represents a data point in a larger argument about ancient human capability, about what our ancestors understood, what they could engineer, and how much of that knowledge has been lost. The ancient world was not populated by primitive minds in primitive bodies. The brains that looked up at the night sky 40,000 years ago were neurologically identical to ours. Given sufficient time and motivation, they could have discovered and lost almost anything we know today. This context matters because it tells us something important. What we are about to investigate is not an isolated curiosity. It is part of a pattern that researchers in multiple fields have been independently documenting for decades, and patterns in science demand explanation. With that foundation in place, let us now turn to the specific case at hand. Now we reach the heart of the matter. The core evidence surrounding the Paracas Textile Enigma, ancient fabric technology that still baffles scientists, is more extensive, more verified, and more troubling for conventional explanations than most people realize. Let us walk through it systematically, fact by fact, and allow the evidence to speak for itself. We are not going to speculate here. Every point that follows is documented in peer-reviewed publications, official archaeological records, or government archives that are publicly accessible. The question is not whether these facts are real. The question is what they mean. Consider this first extraordinary detail. The Paracas culture flourished on the southern coast of Peru between roughly 800 and 100 BC, producing textiles recovered primarily from elaborate burial bundles in the hyper-arid Paracas Peninsula. The extreme dryness of the Atacama Desert is directly responsible for the textile's survival. Organic fibers that would decay within decades in a humid climate were preserved almost perfectly over 2 millennia. This single data point, if taken in isolation, might be set aside. Anomalies happen. Instruments malfunction. Researchers make mistakes. But as we continue, you will see that this is not an isolated anomaly. It is part of a consistent and documented pattern. But that is only the beginning. Researchers also discovered thread counts in the finest Paracas textiles have been independently measured at up to 398 threads per inch. Modern luxury Egyptian cotton, considered the global standard for high thread count fabric, typically reaches 200 to 400 threads per inch, using industrial machinery with precision-engineered spindles. The Paracas weavers matched or exceeded this using hand tools in a pre-industrial society, and the consistency of their thread diameter across long continuous lengths has no satisfactory mechanical explanation. Now, a skeptic might propose an alternative explanation for this, and that is entirely reasonable. We should always test alternative explanations before accepting extraordinary ones. The problem is that the alternative explanations, when examined carefully, create more problems than they solve. The mystery deepens when we examine. Fiber analysis has identified both cotton and camelid fibers, alpaca and vicuña, in the Paracas textiles. Vicuña fiber is among the finest natural animal fiber in the world, measuring approximately 12 microns in diameter, finer than cashmere. The weavers selected, sorted, and spun these fibers to achieve thread diameters that scanning electron microscopy confirms are thinner than a single human hair, which typically measures 70 microns across. This is where the conventional account begins to strain. Each individual fact might be dismissed or minimized in isolation. But the cumulative weight of the evidence is another matter entirely. Perhaps most remarkable of all, dye analysis of Paracas textiles has identified a sophisticated palette of organic and mineral sources. Cochineal, an insect-derived red dye of extraordinary vibrancy, is confirmed in multiple samples, alongside indigo, iron-based yellows, and tannin-derived browns. The dye application is consistent, suggesting controlled dyeing processes rather than improvised coloring. Some shades have not been fully chemically replicated despite modern analysis. Researchers who have examined this evidence have described it as genuinely difficult to explain within the accepted framework. These are not fringe commentators. They are credentialed academics publishing in mainstream journals, raising questions that the field has not yet satisfactorily answered. Then there is the matter of the embroidered imagery on Paracas mantles includes complex mythological scenes with figures rendered in what textile scholars describe as three-dimensional perspective, an unusual achievement in ancient embroidery. Recurring motifs include a fanged deity figure, trophy heads, and transformed humans with animal features. The Textile Museum in Washington, D.C., and Lima's National Museum of Anthropology hold major collections, and scholarly cataloging of motifs is still ongoing. What makes this particularly significant is its independence from the previous points. This is not a case of one theory requiring another. These are separate lines of evidence converging on the same uncomfortable conclusion. Adding to the enigma is this finding. The largest known Paracas textile is approximately 24 meters long and nearly 4 meters wide, embroidered entirely in multicolored wool over a plain weave cotton base. The number of individual stitches required is estimated in the hundreds of thousands. Heather Lechman and Anna Soldi produced the most technically rigorous analyses of Paracas textile construction in the 1980s. No subsequent researcher has substantially overturned their findings, and several of the technical questions they raised remain unanswered. Taken together, these facts form a pattern that cannot be explained by coincidence, misidentification, or methodological error. Each piece of evidence has been examined by skeptics. Each has been subjected to alternative explanations, and in each case, the alternative explanation falls short of accounting for everything that has been documented. We are left with a body of evidence that demands explanation and an accepted narrative that does not provide one. This is where serious inquiry begins. Now that we have established the evidence, we need to examine the theories that researchers have proposed to explain the Paracas Textile Enigma, ancient fabric technology that still baffles scientists. This is where the debate becomes most intense, because the theories reflect not just different interpretations of the same evidence, but fundamentally different assumptions about what is possible and what the past looked like. Understanding these theories is not just an academic exercise. Each one has been championed by serious researchers with genuine credentials, and each one captures something that the others miss. The truth, if it is ever established, will likely draw on elements of several. The first major explanation proposed by researchers holds that mainstream textile historians argue that Paracas weavers developed extraordinary technical skill through centuries of accumulated craft refinement, specialized knowledge transmitted across generations in dedicated workshop settings. There is no mystery requiring exotic explanation. Sustained practice, material selection, and community investment in textile production as a prestige activity are sufficient to account for the results. The main objection is that no spinning tool recovered from the region demonstrably produces thread of the fineness observed. This interpretation has significant academic support and is backed by substantial evidence. But it is not without problems. Critics point out that it requires assumptions that go beyond what the evidence strictly supports, and that key predictions of this theory have not been confirmed by subsequent research. It remains contested, and the contest is productive. A rival school of thought argues that some researchers propose that the finest Paracas threads were produced using an unknown or undiscovered spinning technology, possibly a tool that has not survived in the archaeological record, or a technique involving moisture, tension, and animal fiber properties that has been lost. The consistency of thread diameter across long lengths is cited as evidence of a controlled mechanical process rather than purely manual spinning. Critics note that absence of the tool does not prove absence of conventional technique. This theory is controversial, and deliberately so. Its proponents argue that the evidence demands an explanation outside the conventional framework. Critics counter that extraordinary claims require extraordinary evidence, and that the evidence presented, while suggestive, does not yet meet that standard. The debate continues in peer-reviewed literature. Perhaps the most unconventional theory suggests that a third position holds that Paracas textile production was organized as centralized specialist craft rather than household production. Essentially, an early form of workshop manufacture with quality control and division of labor. This would explain the consistency and scale without requiring unknown technology. The main objection is that archaeological evidence for large-scale dedicated workshops in the Paracas region remains limited and contested. What is striking about this debate is not merely that experts disagree. That is normal and healthy in science. What is striking is the quality of the disagreement. Serious researchers, working from the same body of evidence, reaching genuinely different conclusions. That level of fundamental disagreement, when it persists over decades, is a signal that something important has not yet been understood. The question is not which of these theories is right. The question is whether any of them is right, or whether the truth is something that none of the current frameworks has yet been able to capture. The case surrounding the Paracas Textile Enigma, ancient fabric technology that still baffles scientists, does not rest on speculation alone. What distinguishes this investigation from pure mythology is the existence of documented, physical, verifiable evidence, material that has been examined by credentialed researchers and whose authenticity is not seriously disputed. What is disputed is its interpretation. Let us review the most significant documented evidence as objectively as possible. We are not going to cherry-pick the data that supports a preferred conclusion. We are going to lay out what exists and let you draw your own assessment. Physical evidence supporting this account includes scanning electron microscopy of Paracas thread samples shows individual fibers spun to a consistent diameter that independent analysts describe as impossible to achieve randomly by hand. The uniformity suggests either an extraordinarily skilled and trained hand spinner or a controlled process not yet identified. Multiple textile laboratories in the United States, Germany, and Peru have confirmed the thread count measurements independently, ruling out measurement error as an explanation. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Investigators have documented dye analysis using gas chromatography and mass spectrometry has confirmed the organic sources of Paracas pigments: cochineal, dactylopius carcass, indigo, indigofera, and various tannin sources. The dye chemistry is well understood. What is not fully explained is how colorants were applied with such consistency across large textile surfaces without streaking or unevenness, a process control challenge even in modern natural dyeing. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. On-site analysis revealed fiber identification studies have confirmed the use of vicugna fiber in some of the finest Paracas textiles. Vicuña was a protected animal in the Inca period, and its use was restricted to royalty. Its presence in pre-Inca Paracas textiles indicates high social status and access to scarce materials. The Textile Museum's collection has been the primary source for scientific sampling, and Lechman and Soldi's technical analyses remain the most comprehensive published to date. This evidence has been subjected to independent verification. Skeptics have examined it. Alternative explanations have been proposed and tested. The data remains. The question of what it means remains open. Each individual piece of evidence might, in principle, be explained away. A single anomalous artifact might be misidentified. A single anomalous date might reflect contamination. A single anomalous eyewitness account might reflect misperception. The question is whether all of the evidence can be explained away, and whether the explanations required are more or less plausible than the evidence itself. When multiple independent lines of inquiry converge on the same conclusion, that convergence is the most powerful signal in empirical science. And that is exactly what we are seeing here. We have examined the history, the evidence, and the theories surrounding the Paracas Textile Enigma, ancient fabric technology that still baffles scientists. Now, we need to ask the question that is sometimes overlooked in discussions of ancient mysteries. Why does this matter? What does it mean for us today? It would be easy to file this away as an interesting historical curiosity, a puzzle from a distant past with no bearing on our present lives. That would be a fundamental mistake. The questions raised by this case touch on issues that are directly relevant to who we are, where we came from, and what the human story actually looks like before the period covered by conventional history. Paracas textiles are now recognized as among the finest ancient fabrics ever recovered from any archaeological context worldwide. The National Museum of Anthropology in Lima holds the largest single collection, and conservation is a critical ongoing challenge. Fibers that survived 2,000 years in the desert are vulnerable to humidity, light, and handling. Thread count measurements have been verified by independent analysis and are not disputed. What remains disputed is the mechanism. No modern hand spinner using period-appropriate tools has replicated the finest Paracas threads in controlled conditions. Interest in Andean textile technology has grown significantly since 2000, and several research programs are active. The textiles are also central to ongoing debates about Paracas' cultural identity, including the controversial elongated skull finds from the same burial bundles. Furthermore, the tools available to investigate these questions are advancing rapidly. Satellite imaging, ground-penetrating radar, ancient DNA analysis, isotopic tracing, and deep-sea sonar are all providing capabilities that previous generations of researchers could only dream of. Cases that were genuinely unresolvable 10 years ago are now open to new analysis, and the findings, consistently, are expanding rather than contracting the mystery. The investigation continues. New discoveries are being made. New analyses are being published. New voices are entering the conversation from disciplines that were not previously part of the discussion. The answers, when they come, and they will come, will not merely solve a historical puzzle. They will force a fundamental revision of assumptions that underpin our entire understanding of human history and human potential. We have now walked through the complete case of the Paracas Textile Enigma, ancient fabric technology that still baffles scientists, from the historical record through the physical evidence, across the competing theories, and into the modern significance of what remains unresolved. What the story of Paracas ultimately reveals is not just a historical puzzle. It is a mirror. It reflects our assumptions back at us, our assumptions about what ancient people were capable of, about how knowledge is gained and lost across the centuries, and about the relationship between what we know and what we merely think we know. The evidence presented in this documentary is real. The questions it raises are genuine. The debate among researchers is ongoing, and that is healthy. Science is not a set of conclusions. It is a process. And the process requires that we remain open to evidence that challenges what we thought we knew, however uncomfortable that challenge might be. If you came to this documentary as a skeptic, we hope the evidence gave you something to think about. If you came as a true believer, we hope the critical examination gave you a more nuanced picture. The truth, as always, lies in the evidence, not in what we want to be true. Thank you for watching. If this investigation sparked your curiosity, please subscribe to the channel. We publish new documentaries every week, covering the full range of historical mysteries that the mainstream has not yet adequately explained. Leave a comment below telling us which case you want us to investigate next. The conversation continues. The investigation never ends.